Hello, everybody. Welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, my friend, still sat here, still got weird zooms on Google Meets. That thing seems to want to zoom into my face depending on what point I'm making. So if at some point the framing completely changes, that's not me, that's Google. But we thought we'd do a separate video based on the fact that one of the things that stood out to us from the Xbox Summer Showcase, the game showcase, whatever that thing was called that we just saw, is that Xbox very much seem to be resetting their brand, very much steering into a lot of the negativity that they've had across this generation. And I'm fascinated by that as a general sort of marketing tactic. We covered it a little bit in our initial reveal, but I wanted to pick it apart a little bit. Mainly the things that point towards this from the conference are, the likes of Fable, Halo, and Forza, all just being their brand name. It hasn't got a number after it. Obviously, you've got Halo Infinite, but Fable and Forza were just given their straight names. And that makes me think that they're sort of going with this whole idea of lots of new people coming into the industry, into the medium, picking the Xbox brand the same way you would pick some sort of monthly subscription to watch a bunch of movies. And they want to have a lot of entry-level titles for those people. What do you think of that? First off, what do you think of that as a general way to approach the next generation of consoles?
It's what I prefer, honestly, because it gets to the point where you get to a certain kind of number. And even though the games themselves are not inaccessible by any means, you could pick up Halo Infinite, I imagine, and have a good time. You could pick up Halo 4 or 5 and have a good time. It feels like if you're trying to get a new generation of players, you don't want to imply that there's so much baggage that they've either missed out on or that they need to catch up on, you know what I mean? I feel like at this point, when we're so far in the kind of weeds with these franchises that have been around for decades now, it's cool to have a clean slate, not only from a marketing perspective, so you can kind of market these games as new beginnings or whatever, but also from like a gameplay and development perspective, so you can do new and interesting things. I think Halo Infinite is the biggest example. When Halo 4 came out, there was the big deal about how this was the start of the new trilogy, you know what I mean? We're going to do 3 more games, it's going to tell an overarching story. And yeah, it kind of has, but I think this is very clearly saying that plans have changed. This is Halo Infinite, it's a new thing, even though it's continuing the story. We're going open world, we're adding in a grappling hook, we're doing all these new and interesting things. Like, get on board, this is like a new beginning for the franchise, even though it's still very distinctly the thing you love. And I don't know, I like that. I like the cleanness of it. And as a kind of not a lapsed Xbox fan, but someone who is gung-ho about Microsoft and its series as I was back in 2012 and 2013. Yeah. Like that's more inviting to me.
Like you said, it's very clean. It's strange because I completely forgot about that whole new trilogy thing of 4, 5, and 6, and 5 very much ends on a cliffhanger, which maybe they'll get round to. It kind of feels like they've just gone, that was a weird experiment, that didn't work. Oh my god, the Master Chief Collection was on fire for about 5 years, and we've got that back around again. So let's actually focus on making a good Halo. Because we sort of noted in the reveal stuff that Halo Infinite is very much going down the route of like Halo 101. It's like the box art looks the same as Halo 1. The level they showed off is very much like the Silent Cartographer. All the sound effects that you remember are all right there, the shield boosting back up and things like that. And it's just weird. It's just one of the things that if we were going to clickbait the hell out of this title or out of a potential title, it will be something about Sony have already won the next console generation or something like that. But the reality to that statement is that Microsoft just aren't even competing anymore in that space. And another thing I wanted to talk about is when Phil Spencer mentioned, I think this was last year, that his main competitors he sees for Xbox are Google and Amazon. They're not Sony and Nintendo. And at the time, everyone was like, "What the hell are you talking about? That's insane. You're in this field. These guys are your contemporaries and your competitors." But I see exactly what he means now, because the same sort of route that Google tried to take with Stadia is you're just making a wide platform on as many devices as possible for as many people as possible, and exclusives don't matter. Entire series don't necessarily matter. You just want to make all those franchises, those IPs, as accessible to as many people as possible. I don't know if that's actually good quality-wise for those IPs, though.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's yet to be seen, but I do, like you said there, like the Xbox brand, it's almost become a sort of platform for content, and the whole synergy between, Windows and the Xbox One and the Xbox Series X, the unannounced Xbox Series S, the Xbox One S, all of these different consoles. Yeah, the Lockhart thing. Like the synergy between them is a very kind of purposeful move, and it's like, it's almost Phil Spencer going, look, you can play these games at least for the first few years on the Xbox Series X if you want. You'll get a better version of them from a graphics and performance standpoint. But we don't mind what you play it on, as long as you buy into our service and our platform. That's all that matters to us. And it is, like you said, a completely different ballgame. And like we talked about in the previous video, but I feel like it will pay off for them, because I feel like that's how games are also moving. You know, like the biggest games now, for the most part, obviously there are some exceptions, but in general, the industry is trending towards live services, games as platforms. People have been loving the hell out of Rainbow Six Siege for 5 years now. We've got Destiny 2, which was shown off here. We've even got Grand Theft Auto 5, which was shown off at the PlayStation 5
7 years old, that game.
Coming back. It's 7 years old. It's coming out on PlayStation 5. It's getting a remastered, because games are now, again, for better or worse, I'm not sure if I like it, but they're a platform for content.
They're all
going
infinite.
to be ever evolving. And like you said, I'm not sure whether that's ultimately a good move for the franchises themselves that we know and love and think of in a certain way. But it's certainly them kind of going with the times. And to be honest, that's exactly what Xbox tried to do back in 2013. They just did it in such a ham-fisted, head up their own arse way that the messaging was all over the place. Like, the ideas they had back then, for the most part, including, you know, a digital-only future, even kind of incorporating entertainment into the overall box. Like, inherently, they're not bad ideas. It was just, and they weren't kind of far off ideas. It was where the industry at the time was trending. It was just, they kind of botched the messaging, which I think they've done. I just think they've done a good job avoiding that this time and having good messaging, and just have these weird ideas that people might not like.
Yeah, well, that was the thing about the messaging, like you said, back in 2013, like that idea of paying for one game once you own the license, then you can access it from a bunch of different places. Like, they were decent ideas. They were very forward-thinking ideas. It was just the way that they were presented. I think they very much sort of calmly took a step back, and a lot of the new Xbox marketing strategies do still have their roots in that whole one-for-all mentality, which is what they were trying to do back then. Just that Phil Spencer is a way better spokesperson than Don Matrick was, especially when he talks to the press in like a live capacity. But also, talking of those specific games that I brought up before, do you think that like resetting Fable was maybe the only way that they could have gone, because Fable 3 is like 2008 or 7 or whatever, and it's just too old at this point? You just sort of reset the whole thing and just hope that people care again.
Yeah, I feel like with Fable especially, there was no real other way you can do that. Like, the rumors suggest that, at least initially, the next Fable is going to continue the story of, well, the world of Fable, and then essentially change things radically after that. But with that series, you know, like you said, Fable 3 wasn't well received. Lionhead obviously shut down, so the original developers aren't working on this game.
Peter Molyneux's a maniac.
Peter Molyneux continues to prove that he's a very strange man who I am kind of obsessed with, because
he's got some great, like the Xbox in 2013, got some great ideas. Absolute madman, absolutely lost it.
I like it. Bring it back. I want him to talk more. Yeah, like Fable, like I feel like they were sort of between a rock and a hard place, because the franchise had its fans, obviously, but the last few installments weren't amazingly received. So if you did a Fable 4, you might have people saying, well, I don't want this to continue a story that I've either dropped off of, don't know, or didn't like. But on the other hand, you've got, well, I'm not buying Fable 4 from the people who didn't make the other Fables, you know what I mean? So a clean break, I think. Again, it like opens it up to a new audience and removes kind of like the shackles from the developers creatively, and allows them to kind of go nuts with this IP, which ultimately is what I think a lot of these franchises need. Again, to compare it to Sony, like, look at God of War. God of War wasn't a franchise I gave two craps about back in the PS3 era, and yet now it's one of my... He's a popular man, but like that style of gameplay wasn't for me. And then they completely like retooled that, gave it a more mature kind of focus in terms of thematics and narrative. And now I absolutely love God of War, and I went back and enjoyed the other ones in because of that. And I want them to do that kind of same approach with some of their franchises here, with Fable, potentially with Halo.
Well, see, the thing that they're doing, though, is almost the opposite of that, because they're not doing like a matured Master Chief who's, well, they might be, but it doesn't seem like they're doing this matured version of Master Chief who's seen all these events and realized his own past like he did in a Halo 5, and now he's this, you know, this one dude who's lost Cortana and he's sort of putting up with everything in the future. It very much seems like bright, shiny armor, Halo 1 style. This is the Halo you know and love, and let's get everybody on board. But yeah, I don't know if that was like something that you sort of like picked up on as well.
Yeah, because I've said that, but Halo is Halo Infinite. Like I said, man, it's a funny one because at once they're trying to say, look, this is something entirely new. We've got an open world, we've got a brand new gameplay structure. But at the same time, they're also trying to play the card of, nope, this is the Halo you love. It's got the aesthetic of combat evolved. There were rumors that the multiplayer is going back to the classic style as well. It's like, look, these are the core tenets of why you love Halo. But I think you can have that while still giving us something new, and hopefully, and I am admittedly placing all my chips on this open world gimmick being really good and revolutionizing the franchise, but hopefully that is something fresh, something interesting. It might not be, but I'm wanting them to go down that route with this franchise, man.
Yeah, I think, I mean, maturation of a franchise obviously can happen, like, regardless, like, it can be in thematic, story, whatever, like, gameplay mechanics. But one thing I was going to ask, because it's just, the one thing that I think they really need to drill down on is their messaging around exclusives, because I feel like Phil Spencer is saying one thing that sort of is almost opposite or doesn't really line up with all of the world premiere exclusive, all the terminology that's there. I guess, what do you think about the whole, like, exclusives anti-consumer thing? And does it feel like you still need them? Because it's almost like the addendum on his side is like, yeah, exclusives, they hold people back and we want everything for everybody as long as you're on the Windows side.
Well, that's it. I think we have to be kind of very clear that when he's talking about this, he's more or less acting like other companies don't exist. Because like you said, he's not necessarily competing with PlayStation anymore. When he's talking about the idea of exclusives being anti-consumer, he's talking purely between different Xbox consoles. He's not talking about, between PlayStation and Xbox. He's talking about the ability for Xbox One owners to play things on the Xbox Series X and vice versa, because obviously with the world premieres and even buying all the studios that Microsoft has bought, it's very clear that they need games exclusive to their platform, not necessarily a console, but certainly the Xbox brand and the Windows brand to sell that platform to people. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of fine, and if that's cleared up, that's kind of much better than people being like, well, Phil Spencer hates exclusives, and yet we're getting all these exclusives that are on the way from the likes of Obsidian or Ninja Theory and stuff.
Well, I mean, when he first said that was how I took that, because he does say about so much about like the value of video games for the good of the world, the good of the planet, or whatever. He talks a lot about the art form, and he wants to get on his soapbox and sort of talk about the value of video games overall, which I'm totally for. And so I thought, well, if you're operating on that scale, then you don't believe in exclusives per platform. You believe in complete agnosticism, and Master Chief should be everywhere, and everybody should be able to access Fable everywhere. But then, like you said, like I said, the reality of that is that everything is in a Windows through a Windows lens. And then, like you said, it is, if you take that, apply that, he is sort of just saying, he's only really referring to cross compatibility between the Xbox family and the PC family or whatever, and that's like a weird way to go as well. But yeah, I don't know, it's so fascinating, like having just seen like most of that showcase and just see them not yield to a lot of the pressure. They sort of went, here's our third party showcase, here's our first party showcase and second party, and they've not really yielded and gone like, here's a bunch of gameplay, here's complete confirmation of everything, here's an extended Hellblade 2 demo or whatever. They're very much playing a very specific, considered hand, and that doesn't get me going the same way the PS5 stuff does, or even Nintendo's Directs do. But that's maybe intentional if the game you're playing is just not the one that we've had for the last 20-30 years.
What I will say is, if this showcase or whatever happened 2 months ago, I would be so hype on it. And I mean, I still think it's solid, but if it happened 2 months ago, I'd be like, this is a great showing. But the fact that it's I honestly, man, but the fact that it's like the second showing, the fact that we know they've only got some more games to show. We've seen quite a lot of them now. We don't know the price. We don't know anything about Lockhart. It's like, we're getting close to launch. Well, I'm not sure if you've got any more tricks up your sleeve, you know what I mean? Whereas in Sony, like again, Sony might not. Sony might have played most of their hand with their last showing as well. But the fact of the matter is, like, they've still got at least one more big conference up their sleeve. So Microsoft, in a way, is kind of like on the back foot, where they've shown their hands. And now we've only got what we imagine Sony has to compare it to. But my thing is that, like, because I said to you after it finished, I was like, I don't feel like they've given you a reason to buy the Series X. And I feel like if you sort of go down the layman route, like the mass market route, if you sort of ask somebody, the average person, it's like, if someone asks you, why should I buy the Xbox Series X? What is the answer to that question? Because if it was, why should I buy the PS5? It's like, well, then you can play this,
and there's also PlayStation Now and whatever. Like, yeah, they have Game Pass, but I always feel like everybody defaults to where are the games. And I guess if the answer to why should I buy the Series X is I can get Game Pass and DirectX and whatever, but then you can also get that on one of the cheaper systems from a couple of years ago. I guess they don't care because you'd still be with the Xbox family, but it just seems like such a strange way to go.
Well, yeah, I mean, like when it comes to video game consoles, for the most part, you know, like they sell at a loss when they first, for the first few years of their life. So Microsoft isn't going to make much money off the Xbox Series X. It is a kind of conduit to get people in and get them in for, you know, Games Pass and get them in for their subscription services and get them in for the software, which admittedly they have a lot of now. They've got a lot of teams, they've got a lot of games coming out that might not be exclusive just to the Xbox Series X, but they're exclusive to the Xbox brand. And like you said, like that is their long-term game, to get people involved in this entire family, this entire ecosystem. And whether or not it pays out, I don't know. It's a bold strategy. It's one that we haven't really seen from the big three, maybe ever. But whether or not it pays off in the way they want, I don't know. But I kind of hope it does for them, because it would bring something fascinating and an element of competition that, like I said, we just haven't really seen.
Yeah, they're very much doubling down on, like, you know, like brand Xbox. Brand Xbox is Halo, it's Gears, it's Forza, like it's Fable, and then here is all these other sort of titles that you get alongside that. This bulk of stuff that you pay monthly for, and that's completely different to buying this big console on the Sony side, buying this big console with a handful of games that you can only get on that system. It's just, yeah, they're completely different business models. But let us know anything down in the comments below. Do you think that approach is going to work in the long term, or have they just kind of been forced to embrace this second place mentality that they've kind of been forced into because Sony are just so far ahead on all the first party stuff? For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
I'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.